I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's July 2nd, and we have a lot to talk about. When it comes to living your best life when you're living with MS, the first step is to make smart lifestyle choices. Choosing to maintain a healthy lifestyle doesn't necessarily require pills, injections, or infusions, and it can make a real measurable difference in your quality of life. Joining me to talk about the benefits of maintaining a healthy lifestyle and to share some tips and strategies for living your best life when you're living with MS is Dr. Lisa Doggett. Dr. Doggett is a family and lifestyle medicine physician at the MS and Neuroimmunology Center at Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin, and she's the senior medical director for Sagility. Dr. Doggett herself was diagnosed with MS in 2009, and she's the author of the memoir, Up the Down Escalator, Medicine, Motherhood, and Multiple Sclerosis. But before we get to my conversation with Dr. Lisa Doggett, there are a few other things that you should know about. Stem cell transplantation is a hot topic in the MS community, so I know many of you will be interested in the 5-year, $2.9 million grant awarded by the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke to researchers at the University of Buffalo's Cell, Gene, and Tissue Engineering Center. Stem cell therapy for MS is designed to work by introducing stem cells that can make new nerve cells or myelin-making cells. These stem cells are introduced into a patient's brain by suspending them in a saline solution and injecting them into the brain using a syringe. Well, it turns out that being squeezed through a needle is a rough way for stem cells to travel. Many of them are damaged in the process, and the vast majority of stem cells end up dying soon after they're injected. The University of Buffalo research team is developing something called shear thinning hydrogels, or STHs, to cushion the ride for stem cells as they're being injected. STHs have a gel-like consistency, but they do a bit of shape-shifting and become more fluid when pressure is applied, such as the pressure that's applied when they're squeezed through that syringe. The plan is for STHs to surround the stem cells, change their viscosity at the time of the injection, and then change back to their gel-like consistency once they're in the brain. And these STHs can be customized to help promote the stem cell's survival once it's in the brain. The research team has already conducted proof-of-concept experiments in mice that have been genetically engineered to be unable to produce myelin. The team reported that transplanting human stem cells with STHs into the brains of the mice significantly improved the survival rate of the transplanted cells and enhanced nerve repair in the brain, as was measured 12 weeks later. This new technology could bring us closer to gaining FDA approval for stem cell transplantation as an effective therapy with the ability to stop MS. The European Commission has approved a subcutaneous formulation of OKRIS to treat adults with relapsing forms of MS as well as primary progressive MS, making this easier to administer formulation of OKRIS available to people living with MS across Europe. As many of you know, the original OKRIS formulation is given twice a year in either a 2-hour or 4-hour infusion. This newly approved formulation is administered twice a year by an under-the-skin injection that takes 10 minutes. The approval of subcutaneous OKRIS comes after a clinical trial that compared the safety, efficacy, and pharmacological properties of intravenous OKRIS and subcutaneous OKRIS. And as we've previously reported, the clinical trials showed little to no difference between the two formulations in terms of their safety and efficacy, with more than 92% of the clinical trial participants who received subcutaneous OKRIS reported being satisfied or very satisfied with the new formulation. Now, getting a few hours of your life back is always a good thing. Not to mention that infusion centers can be difficult to get to, and some infusion centers have limited capacity to deliver infusion medications. So this approval by the European Commission will go a long way toward making OKRIS more patient-friendly. Roche, the manufacturer of OKRIS, has already filed for FDA approval of subcutaneous OKRIS in the United States, and that decision is expected in September. You can be sure we'll keep you posted once it's announced. We've often talked about the benefit of identifying a biomarker that could predict future MS disease activity. Neurofilament light chain, a protein that's released into the bloodstream when nerve cells in the central nervous system are damaged, has proven to be a likely candidate for an easy-to-measure indicator that could help detect MS, predict MS disease activity, and even measure someone's response to treatment in MS and other neurological disorders. Siemens Healthineers, in collaboration with Novartis, has developed a lab-based blood test that measures neurofilament light chain, and this blood test has received the CE mark in Europe for use with adults living with relapsing remitting MS. Used along with clinical and imaging data, this test may help predict whether a person with MS is most likely going to experience worsening disease activity over the next 2 years. This kind of insight allows for proactive intervention to better manage what might be coming next for that individual. Now, CE marking is used to monitor and regulate goods sold within the European Union. The CE mark indicates that the test has been checked by a notified body and complies with European Union standards for medical devices. Siemens Healthineers is planning for a market launch later this year, although this device is not for sale in the United States. A couple of weeks ago, the International Progressive MS Alliance hosted a global webcast on mobility challenges in progressive MS, presenting new research designed to monitor and maximize mobility. The webcast featured a panel of 3 researchers discussing their current work to identify and measure mobility challenges in progressive MS. They also talked about how early detection and intervention for changes in mobility can lead to a better quality of life. Now, if you missed the live webcast, you can still catch the video replay, and you'll find that link in today's show notes. There are still people living with MS who believe that improving their quality of life is dependent upon a magic pill, or an injection, or a new infusion treatment. My guest today is Dr. Lisa Doggett, and she's here to share lifestyle strategies that are designed to improve your quality of life, and you can adopt these strategies today. In a moment, we'll meet Dr. Lisa Doggett. When it comes to living your best life when you're living with MS, the first step is to make smart lifestyle choices. Choosing to maintain a healthy lifestyle doesn't require any pills, injections, or infusions, and it can make a real difference in your quality of life. Joining me to talk about the benefits of maintaining a healthy lifestyle and to share some tips and strategies for how to go about living your best life is Dr. Lisa Doggett. Dr. Doggett is a family and lifestyle medicine physician at the MS and Neuroimmunology Center at Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin, and she's the Senior Medical Director for Sagility. Dr. Doggett was diagnosed with MS in 2009, and she's the author of the memoir, Up the Down Escalator, Medicine, Motherhood, and Multiple Sclerosis, which follows her transformation from doctor to patient living with MS. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Doggett.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Lifestyle medicine may not be a term that all our listeners are familiar with, so I hope you'll start us off by explaining what lifestyle medicine is and why it's so important to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Yes, thank you so much. So lifestyle medicine is really focused on, it's a newer field, and it's focused on helping prevent, treat, and reverse chronic diseases. There are 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. So not surprisingly, nutrition and exercise are 2 of those pillars, but the other ones include sleep, stress management, avoidance of risky substances, and my favorite, which is connecting with others. These are not specific to MS. These are important healthy health habits for everybody, but they are particularly important for those of us with MS because we are at higher risk of other chronic conditions. We're at higher risk for heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, other autoimmune diseases, and all of these can be impacted by healthy lifestyle.
So, what is the best way, the best path for someone to go about incorporating these 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine into their lives?
Well, I think it's important to make that commitment, first of all. For me, I realized early on that one chronic disease is more than enough, and I didn't want to get sick with anything else besides MS. So I've used MS as an excuse to really prioritize self-care. I've also would encourage all of you to learn the best ways to stay healthy. And it's very confusing. There is so much misinformation out there. You have to sort out fact from fiction, really partner with your doctor and reliable sources of information like the National MS Society to make sure you're getting accurate, really reliable information that's actionable. And then you want to assess your current situation. So where are you doing well? Where are you falling short? Why might you want to change? And then what are you actually willing to change? When you make those decisions and kind of do that assessment, you can set some specific goals that you know you can reach. They're specific, they're realistic, and impactful, will make a difference in your life.
Like many people living with MS, a lot of my listeners are keenly interested in how diet may impact their MS. Now, I know you mentioned nutrition as one of those 6 pillars, so tell me, is there a specific MS diet?
Well, we don't know yet because there's a lot of research going on and no particular diet has emerged as the single MS diet. However, we know that the traditional American diet is not the MS diet, and it is not the healthiest diet for anyone. What we have learned through looking at decades of research is that a whole food, plant-based diet is the best diet to help reduce other chronic conditions. And we also know that people with MS who develop those comorbidities or other chronic conditions tend to do worse. They don't function as well. They tend to have a poor quality of life. So if we can help improve their quality of life through diet and reduce those comorbidities, we're going to be doing a lot to improve outcomes for people with MS. So a whole food plant-based diet, what does that mean? That really is a diet that's focused on fruits, vegetables. I recommend at least 5 servings a day, reducing or avoiding red meat, avoiding sugar-sweetened beverages, reducing or avoiding ultra-processed food, which is most of the food that comes in plastic wrap, and really increasing things like whole grains, legumes, seeds, nuts, really trying to make sure you get food. A lot of this food that we get that's unhealthy is fast foods from restaurants with lots of added salt and sugar. And so if you can get those foods fresh and from the grocery store, we actually suggest shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. That's where fruits and vegetables tend to be. A lot of the more processed foods are in the center. So go that perimeter of the grocery store, get some good recipes, and try to create a lot of your own home food from home, and that's going to be healthier.
We're all creatures of habit, and making changes to your diet can sometimes be challenging. What are some effective strategies for adopting and maintaining a healthy, nutritious diet if you're living with MS?
Well, I think you have to, again, assess where you're starting from. So with my patients, I usually will have them do a 3-day dietary recall or sometimes just a 24-hour dietary recall to kind of see where they may be struggling. So if you're skipping breakfast, for example, which is really common, it's important to start eating breakfast again because that's a really important way to start your day off right and to make sure that you're not overeating later in the day. But you want to get a healthy breakfast in. So what does that look like? Typically we rely on a lot of packaged breakfast cereals. Those are ultra processed and not necessarily the healthiest food. So I think kind of, again, take stock where you're at. Think about where you may be having ultra processed foods and what you could substitute instead. See how many servings of fruits and vegetables a day you're having right now and consider being that amount. Sometimes it can be helpful to have like a meatless Monday, which is kind of an opportunity to try being vegetarian for a day and see what that feels like. And coming up with some new creative non-meat recipes can be another good challenge. So I think it kind of depends where you're at, what you like, what you don't like. You might be also have a family that you're needing to cook for who has certain expectations, and talking with them about how to get on board with trying some new things. I encourage you to be creative and seek out some new cookbooks and resources online.
We know exercise is beneficial for everyone's overall health, and it's been shown to be especially beneficial to people living with MS. But some people living with MS find exercise challenging because of their particular set of MS symptoms. What strategies or adaptations do you suggest for effectively incorporating exercise into a daily routine?
Great question. It can be more difficult to exercise with MS. A lot of us struggle with fatigue, mobility challenges, balance problems, and other limitations. But I do think that almost anyone can exercise if they make it a priority, if they are willing to be creative about the type of exercise and get help to figure out what works for them. So I would encourage people to start with small amounts of exercise to build confidence and stamina, especially if it's been a while since they've been active. But we do know that exercise has been shown to reduce MS progression. And so it's really one of the more important tenets of lifestyle medicine, specifically for MS. It can take different forms for different people. So, it may be that you were used to run and you used to play soccer, and those are things you can't do anymore because you've got mobility challenges. But you can come up with some alternatives, like maybe a recumbent bike or water-based exercises, yoga. Strength training is also important. So resistance or strength exercises at least twice a week are recommended to make sure that we maintain all of those major muscle groups. I also encourage people to focus on their abilities and not their disabilities. If you're struggling to figure out what you can do and you've really got some serious physical limitations, get a physical therapist to help you come up with an exercise regimen that makes sense. And then finally, I think you want to pair exercise with something fun. So that might be watching a TV show when you're on the recumbent bike, or listening to a podcast or an audiobook when you go on a walk, or finding a friend that will go with you to the gym or take a walk or a run.
It's not unusual for an MS diagnosis to bring with it additional stress, and stress can just make everything feel worse. Can you suggest some coping strategies or techniques that are best suited for managing MS-related stress?
Yes, stress management is probably one of the hardest lifestyle medicine tenets, for me at least, and I think for many of us. Having MS definitely adds to that stress. We've got limitations, symptoms, as well as the uncertainty of what's going to happen next. But I think it's really important to try to tackle stress. So some ideas, I think all of the other tenets of lifestyle medicine will help manage stress. So if you're getting exercise, you're eating a healthy diet, you're getting enough sleep, you're connecting with others, you're going to have less stress. You're going to be able to, or you may not have less stress, you'll be able to manage it and deal with it better. I've also found that journaling is really effective. And I write in a journal every night because it helps me process what I've been through and then kind of let it go, get it out of my head and be able to move on. Meditation is an incredibly effective tool for reducing stress. And there's a form of meditation called mindfulness-based stress reduction. There are classes where you can learn how to do mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. You might see if there's some in your community or on virtually, but it's a great tool for reducing stress. There are some wonderful apps for meditation. And then finally, I want to just a shout out there to everybody to be comfortable saying no. I like the saying, say no to say yes, so that when you say no to something, you're saying yes to another opportunity.
Tobacco, addictive drugs, and even alcohol will negatively impact anyone's health. Why is it especially important to avoid these kinds of risky substances if you're living with MS?
Great question. Tobacco use is a known risk factor for a lot of diseases. Of course, we know it increases the risk of heart disease and cancer, but it's a known risk factor specifically for MS and MS progression. So I would tell anyone with MS that smokes or uses tobacco that the most important thing they can do for their health is to stop. reach out to your physician, call a quit line, get some online resources, but it really is critical. In terms of other addictive drugs, those are also dangerous for anyone. I wouldn't say that's specific to MS, but of course you do worry a little bit about drug-drug interactions if you're taking MS medications or other medicines for symptoms. And then alcohol is a real problem for many of us with MS. It can exacerbate our symptoms like balance, for me, dizziness, cognitive problems. It can interrupt our sleep or prevent us from actually falling into a deep sleep. So some people use alcohol to fall asleep, but then they actually never get the quality of sleep that they need. For women, it's recommended to have no more than 1 drink a day, and for men, no more than 2 drinks a day. This is important for everybody. For people with MS, it may be important to reduce it further or to eliminate alcohol completely if it exacerbates your symptoms.
MS can be isolating, both for people who are living with MS and even for their care partners. Can you talk about the importance of social connection?
Yes, social connection, we've learned, actually is a health issue, and it's really important to prioritize relationships that bring you joy. And we know that people who are well connected and don't struggle with loneliness and solitude actually tend to live longer lives and to be healthier in terms of both mental and physical health. So I think that really maintaining those relationships can be really it needs to be a priority. It can be difficult because MS can be very isolating, especially if you have mobility challenges or you're not able to drive. You can sometimes lose those connections that you used to have if you were going to work and you're no longer able to do that. But it's important from a health and well-being standpoint. So you want to reach out to old friends, colleagues, family that you haven't talked to in a while if you're feeling disconnected, and suggest getting together, or at least on the phone, if not in person. Consider taking a class like at a community college or maybe an art school, or going to the YMCA. There's a lot of great classes there. I also really love the idea of volunteering, where you're giving back to someone else and you can meet people that way. Volunteer at an animal shelter or the library or school or even the National MS Society. And then finally, make it a goal. So, make it a goal to reach out and see a friend every week, or write a letter to someone, have a phone call with somebody if you're really not able to leave your house, but at least be able to have that connection.
Speaking of social connection, are there support groups or resources you recommend for connecting with other people who are living with MS?
Absolutely. So the National MS Society website has a lot of different options for support groups. There are many of them that are in person all over the country, but there's also virtual options. I love face-to-face. I think that's best, but it's not an option for everyone, especially if you've got mobility constraints or if you live like in a rural area. But don't be deterred. I think you can find something that will work for you. And if you find a support group that doesn't feel like a good fit, don't be afraid to try more than one.
We've talked about how making some of these lifestyle changes can make a real difference in someone's quality of life. But not every neurologist is going to ask their patient about their lifestyle choices. How can someone go about initiating that conversation with their doctor about incorporating lifestyle changes into their MS management plan?
Well, I think most doctors will be really happy and excited to join their patient in discussing lifestyle medicine changes and new habits that they can incorporate. I think a lot of doctors aren't fully trained, especially in nutrition. So sometimes the patient will actually be educating their doctor if they start to learn more about lifestyle medicine and the different components. But I do think that doctors, for the most part, will be on board. It is important that everyone understand that lifestyle medicine is not to be done in exclusion of disease-modifying therapy for MS. This is a supplement to your therapy, not to be done in exclusion. So I think your doctor will also be glad to hear that you're doing this to improve your overall outcomes and also to prevent other comorbidities. You also will want your doctor to partner with you. So you may need your doctor to make referrals like to physical therapy or for cognitive behavioral therapy. So that can be important for your doctor to be aware that you're kind of taking on this more holistic approach to your health. And if you have a doctor who's truly resistant to lifestyle medicine and the changes you're making and doesn't want to support you, it really may be time to find another doctor.
We always like to talk about evidence-based treatments and interventions on this podcast. What does recent research tell us about the advantages of embracing an overall healthy lifestyle?
More research on lifestyle medicine is emerging all the time. And so it's fun and exciting to see that and to follow it. We have learned that positive lifestyle habits can reduce the incidence of coronary heart disease by more than 80% and the incidence of diabetes by more than 90%. And as you probably know, coronary heart disease is still the number one killer in the United States. What that means is that we need to make physical activity, avoiding tobacco and other unhealthy substances, healthy diet, maintaining a healthy body weight is part of that as well, all part of our lifestyle in order to reduce our risk of those comorbidities. Adopting just one positive behavior can cut your risk of coronary heart disease by half. So it's really important, again, to find what you're willing to do and make those changes. And then finally, plant predominant diets are really, we are seeing more research come out supporting their use in people with all kinds of comorbidities and other chronic conditions. We've learned that a combination of plant predominant diets, physical activity, stress management, and avoidance of unhealthy substances is linked to better cognitive function. And that's a huge issue for people with MS who can struggle with cognitive problems.
Dr. Lisa Doggett, thank you for all you do to improve the lives of people living with MS. And thanks for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society. And you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/357. You'll find that link in today's show notes so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or a text. I hope you'll join me next week when I talk with the director of the Division of Multiple Sclerosis and Translational Neuroimmunology at UConn Health, Dr. Jaime Imitola, about Visible MS. Visible MS is a bilingual educational framework designed to increase awareness of early multiple sclerosis and can make early diagnosis and treatment more accessible, especially for members of underserved communities. In the meantime, if you have a minute, I hope you'll pay a visit to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Real Talk MS app for your iOS or Android smartphone or tablet. It's the best way for us to stay connected. The app will automatically download the latest episode of Real Talk MS. You'll be able to access any of our past episodes. You'll be able to save your favorite episodes. And it's a great way for me to share bonus content with you. The app is free, so I hope you'll download it today. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.